The 7th Congressional District debate on Newswatch 12 starts now.
Good evening and welcome to the 7th Congressional District debate here on Newswatch 12. I'm Justin Betti. This is our debate leading up to the May 12th special election for a seat in Congress representing northern Wisconsin. Representative Sean Duffy held that seat from 2010 till September of last year when he retired, citing family reasons. Tonight we are joined by the two candidates running to fill that seat, Republican State Senator Tom Tiffany and Democrat Tricia Zunker. Of course, because of COVID-19, our setup is a little different tonight. In order to ensure proper social distancing, we are spread out throughout our Newswatch 12 studio. The candidates are a good 12 feet apart. We aim to help you get to know our candidates a little better over the next 60 minutes. We're also live streaming the debate on Facebook, so feel free to give your thoughts or suggest some questions. We may use them on air. Before we get to our questions, though, a little background on each candidate. Mr. Tiffany is currently serving his second term as a state senator. Before that, he served one term in the Wisconsin Assembly. Ms. Zunker is the Wausau School Board president as well as a justice for the Ho-Chunk Nation. Tonight, I'll be asking both candidates essentially the same questions, for which they'll each have 1 minute to respond, followed by 30 seconds each for rebuttal. We'll alternate who goes first, but before we get to our questions, each candidate will have 1 minute to provide an opening statement. Ms. Zunker won the coin toss. She may go first. Ms. Zunker, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Betti, and thank you, WJFW, for hosting this important debate tonight. I was born and raised in Wausau. I grew up in a strong union household, and my mom is a USW Local 2-224 union member to this day. My grandpa was a dairy farmer in Marathon County. I come from humble beginnings, and I know what it is like to live paycheck to paycheck. But there were opportunities in my life that I seized upon, and it allowed me to be a first-generation college graduate, then law school graduate. I'm a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation and serve as a judge for my tribe, as well as professor and school board president for the Wausau School District. I'm also solo parent to an amazing 9-year-old son. I'm running for this seat to be a real representative for the people, to make sure people have affordable health care, economic security, and ensure protection of the environment. Ho-Chunk means people of the big voice, and I'm going to be a big voice for northern Wisconsin in Congress.
Thank you, Senator Tiffany. Your turn. 1 minute.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you, Channel 12, for putting on the debate this evening. My name is Tom Tiffany. I'm a husband to my wife, Chris. It'll be 25 years this year. We have 3 daughters, Carlin, Lexi, and Catherine. We were small business owners for 20 years. And also, I'm the dam tender on the Willow Flowage. Chris and I are like so many families across Wisconsin. We work 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. I'm a citizen legislator serving you in the state Senate. These are extraordinary times in America, and one thing we know about Americans, we always rise to the challenge. I'm tested, I'm proven, and I'll bring a good dose of Wisconsin common sense to Washington, D.C. I look forward to the questions this evening and sharing my vision of how we get America back up on her feet again.
All right, so let's start with the race itself. Last month, Wisconsin was the only state in the union not to cancel, postpone, or move their presidential primary to a mail-in system. Should we be holding an in-person election in less than 2 weeks? We start with Mr. Tiffany.
Yes, I believe we should. In fact, Governor Evers has signaled over the last few weeks that, first of all, there were fewer concerns here in northern Wisconsin. And he signaled once again this week that we should be able to have the election here on May 12th. And I think it's very important that we do have in-person voting, because if you remember back on April 7th, there was news stories that there were thousands of people that did not get their ballots cast because the Postal Service was not able to deliver their ballots. I hear from many people across northern Wisconsin. They say, I want to guarantee that my vote is going to be counted. And the only way we can do it is in-person voting. Also, I've consulted with many clerks across northern Wisconsin here, and they're saying that let's have this election. We have the absentee ballots out there. And by the way, on the April 7th election, I helped work at the polls to make sure that we could have a successful election carried out.
Ms. Zunker, you have 1 minute.
I was deeply saddened to see the thousands of people standing in lines on April 7th, risking their lives to exercise their fundamental right to vote. I called for mail-in election for both the April 7th and May 12th election because I am concerned about the health and safety of Wisconsinites. My opponent did not join me in that call for health and safety of Wisconsinites. I have encouraged people to request absentee ballots, as that is the safest alternative we have to date. However, I do believe that the May 12th special election does have to go forward because we have been without representation for far too long, and it is time that Wisconsin 7 has a real representative for the people again, as we did under Congressman Dave Obey.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal if you'd like it.
Yes, if people feel uncertain about being able to vote, especially the elderly, get that absentee ballot and be sure to vote. But remember, if we don't have, if we would have an election, as my opponent has called for, that's only mail-in, that means people who want the guarantee that their vote is going to count, they would not be able to have that. Many people prefer to be able to go into the ballot, to go into their local municipality and be able to cast their ballot.
Ms. Zunker, you also have 30 seconds.
These are absurd allegations that people's votes aren't going to account. The risk to Wisconsinites' health and safety is far greater than the risk that somebody's vote isn't going to count in a mail-in election. However, the bottom line is the May 12th special election is going forward. We have been without representation, and I'm looking forward to being that representative in Congress.
All right, under a similar topic, Wisconsin remains under a safer at home order right now, which is scheduled to last until May 26th. Do you support the order, and is there anything you would change about it? We start with Ms. Zunker.
I believe that first and foremost, we have got to listen to the medical experts, and we have got to flatten the curve. And we are doing that. I believe that both with the original order and the extension, the April 7th election and the May 12th election should have been included in that order to reduce chaos and confusion. We must always seek to reduce chaos and confusion. And I believe that we need to make sure that our small businesses have what they need. But the bottom line is we have got to focus on health and safety throughout Wisconsin. And that is what we are doing through this order, through safe social distancing measures.
Mr. Tiffany, do you support the safer at home order? Anything you would change about it?
I believe the safer at home order that we had through April 24th really had broad support here in Wisconsin, and people were ready for that. Now that it's been extended through May 26th, some people are starting to question it. I believe we can do both. We're Americans here. We can do both. We can both protect the public's health and safety, as well as be able to open up our state. Open it up cautiously, do it a step at a time, but I believe we can do both. I think the other thing that is happening right now is people are recognizing that we can take a regional approach. If you heard Dr. Birx a few weeks ago, she suggested around America with the guidelines that came from the federal government that it's possible to use a regional approach, and I think we should do that here in Wisconsin also.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Coronavirus does not stop at the county line, and a regional approach could leave us here in rural Wisconsin with hospitals that are overrun with coronavirus, with healthcare workers that contract this virus. Our grocery stores and other essential services could be overrun. We absolutely have to focus on this in the way that we currently are. That is the best advice of the medical experts. I don't think that people in powerful decision-making positions listen to the experts enough, and that is something that I would bring to Congress.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, we should take a safe, responsible approach to this. We know who's affected by this, especially the elderly, the frail elderly, and also those with underlying conditions. Let's make sure we protect them, but otherwise we can do both safely and responsibly. And I'm very concerned about the closure of our healthcare systems. I mean, we have over a dozen clinics that were closed here in northern Wisconsin. Some people are not getting care that they need at this point as a result of those clinics and our healthcare facilities not being open.
So far, Congress has passed and President Trump has approved a number of COVID-19 economic relief packages totaling more than $2 trillion. Would you have voted for them as is? And is there anything you would have liked to see change? We start with Senator Tiffany.
Yeah, I would support the provisions that have come out there, because what we need to do is build a bridge, and that's what I will do if elected to Congress, is we need to make sure we build that bridge both for employees and employers to be able to really get through this tough time and then get back to prosperity. So I think there's good things that have happened. In fact, I voted for a bill just a few weeks ago in the state legislature that authorized taking $2 billion from the federal government that we can use to help here in Wisconsin to be able to make sure that we can provide, especially for those frontline healthcare providers. Governor Evers has the authorization to be able to spend that money to make sure they have the personal protective equipment. And we also voted to eliminate the 1-week waiting period for unemployment to make sure that those employees can make it through this difficult time.
Ms. Zunker, do you approve of the economic relief packages? Anything you would have liked to see changed?
Now more than ever, we see that we need people who can work together so that we can get through this coronavirus pandemic and resume life as normal. I'm committed to working across the aisle to achieve bipartisan solutions that make life better here in Wisconsin. My opponent has stated on the record that he would have voted with the Wisconsin GOP delegation against the Families First Act, which was the initial coronavirus relief legislation that passed in the House. I would have supported that. I would have supported the CARES Act, and I believe that we need to do more. We need to ensure that we have sustainable relief for our families, for our vulnerable populations, for our small businesses, for our farmers. We need to have sustainable relief and not a Band-Aid. We need to have more testing. We need to ensure that our medical professionals have the protective equipment that they need. And we need to make sure that we have some kind of hazard pay for individuals who are on the front lines. People that aren't valued for the work that they do already are sitting out there and they're stocking our grocery stores. They are our gas station clerks, and we need to value them right now.
Mr. Tiffany, do you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal?
Yeah, well, my opponent brings up a really good point here in regards to the first bill. I did express concerns in regards to the mandated employer-paid leave. As a former small business owner, I know what the impact would be on small business owners, and it could break some of them in a short period of time. There was a better way of going about it, and that was to get that aid, to get that help through the unemployment compensation system. I just thought there was a better way of doing that provision.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds.
As soon as the coronavirus pandemic hit, we transitioned everything virtually, and I convened a listening session with individuals throughout this district to find out how they were being impacted by coronavirus. I spoke with a small business owner out of St. Croix County who was able to continue paid leave for her employees specifically because of this coronavirus relief legislation. She's able to get a tax break as a result, and she was still able to pay for her employees during that time.
The cost of health care, both through insurance and treatment, has become a big issue for many Americans. It's rated among the highest priorities for many voters. I'm going to ask each of you just a slightly different question. Ms. Zunker, what's your plan for health care, and would you support Medicare for all? Mr. Tiffany, what's your plan for health care, and would you support repealing the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, even if there's not a replacement? We start with Ms. Zunker.
Prior to this global pandemic hitting, I put thousands upon thousands of miles on my car getting throughout this expansive district. And the number one thing that I heard time and time again was health care. We need to ensure affordable, accessible health care for everyone, including mental health care. We need to ensure that people with pre-existing conditions are covered without penalties, something that my opponent does not support. I support expanding the Affordable Care Act. And I support a robust public option for those that want it. And I also believe that we need to take on big pharma and lower the cost of prescription drugs drastically.
Mr. Tiffany.
Choice, competition, transparency. That's how we get to affordable health care. So if you look at the Affordable Care Act, it did not make health care more affordable. It made it more expensive, and it made it less accessible. Now people want to take the next step, like Bernie Sanders, and have Medicare for all. Medicare for all is going to lead to Medicare for none. You look at our federal deficit, it's about $25 trillion and climbing. The best estimates coming out of Washington, D.C. is that we will double that debt as a result of the Medicare for all program. There's a much better way of going about it. Return control to the states and to local people. Give people more options. We have good, robust options at the state level. We have local employers like Merrill Steel down in Wausau. They brought their own clinic in their building, and they have lowered the cost of their health care and given their employees and their dependents more choices. We can do things like direct primary care, where people, you bring back It's a fancy way of saying bringing back the family doctor, getting the insurance companies and the government out from between the doctor-patient relationship.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I believe that we need to expand the ACA. We need to ensure affordable, accessible health care for everyone. And we need to ensure that people with pre-existing conditions are covered. Again, my opponent does not share that belief. Currently, the Trump administration, with whom my opponent continuously aligns himself, has a lawsuit to dismantle and destroy the ACA. They have no plan in place for if that were to happen. And that means more people would die and more people would go bankrupt. And I simply will not stand for that.
Mr. Tiffany, you also have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, my opponent talks about expanding the health savings account, or excuse me, the Affordable Care Act. In 2009, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, it eliminated the program called HRSP in Wisconsin that provided care for people with pre-existing conditions. I am the only candidate here tonight that has voted to protect people with pre-existing conditions.
Our next question gets a little bit to your style as a politician. Generally speaking, as a politician in Congress, do you believe it's more important to stick to your guns, fight for your side, not give in, or to find middle ground, make deals, and compromise? We begin with Mr. Tiffany.
Yeah, I have strong principles and beliefs, and I have taken them to Madison, and I will take them to Washington, D.C. But I've also found a way to be able to work across the aisle to make sure that we can get good things done for the state of Wisconsin. And I'll do the same thing in Washington, D.C. I'll give you a couple examples. The COVID-19 bill that we passed just a couple weeks ago was a bipartisan bill that was able to get more money for the state of Wisconsin. And also, you look at the last budget. I've sat on the budget writing committee for the last 3 budgets. And while I didn't agree with everything that Governor Evers wanted in the last budget, we were able to hammer out a compromise that did the right thing for Wisconsin, and Governor Evers signed it. I can work across the aisle to do what's best for northern Wisconsin.
Ms. Zunker, more of a deal maker or more of a fighter?
You know, I put thousands upon thousands of miles on my car getting throughout this district, listening to voter concerns, and a common theme kept coming up, and people are tired of attacks, they're tired of political division, and they're tired of gridlock. I am too. I just want to get to work and work hard for the people of Wisconsin. And the very first thing that I did when I got on the Wausau School Board is I reached out to each and every board member. I met with them individually so that I could have a conversation and establish a relationship, so that we weren't just showing up on the voting floor in the Wausau School District, but we actually were able to work well with one another. And the person that I work the best with, quite frankly, I work well with everybody, but the person I work the best with is politically opposite end of the spectrum. And the reason that we work well together is through respectful communication, listening, going to the facts and data as a source of decision making to decide what's best for our district and our community. And that is something that I would bring to Congress. It's important to me to be effective, and I know that you have to be able to work well with one another to accomplish that.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a bit of a false choice, deal maker or fighter. I think you have to fight for your values. And the people of northern Wisconsin, they know after the work that I've done over the last number of years, I will always fight for northern Wisconsin. Whether it's schools, roads, our forest products industry, I will always fight for northern Wisconsin. But I also know that sometimes you have to do what's best for northern Wisconsin, and that is to work with both sides of the aisle, with people with differing opinions, and I've been able to accomplish that.
And Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds.
My opponent says that he's worked well with other sides, but his voting record just demonstrates differently, whether it's destruction to the environment, to public education, to labor rights. Those are things that are not beneficial to northern Wisconsin. I am committed to working across the aisle to achieve bipartisan solutions that make life better here for everyone in Wisconsin.
All right, so hopefully you at home are getting a good feel for who our candidates are. When we come back, we're going to dive a little deeper into some hot topic issues, including gun control. You're watching the 7th Congressional District Debate right here on Newswatch 12. Welcome back to the 7th Congressional District Debate here on Newswatch 12. Again, I'm Justin Betti, and we are joined by Democrat Tricia Zunker and Republican Tom Tiffany. One of these two candidates will represent northern Wisconsin in Congress in Washington following the May 12th special election. Back in March here on Newswatch 12, we ran a story with Ms. Zunker where you talked about you were the childhood friend talking about gun control. He was against any additional gun control measures. You seem like you're looking at compromise. What kind of changes did you have in mind?
Yeah, that was a great conversation with Gunsmith Jake in Wausau. I support the Second Amendment. I support people being able to defend themselves in their homes, and I support our hunters being able to hunt. But as a mom and as a school board president, I see our students having to do active shooter drills. They're being told that you need to hide over here in case somebody comes in to shoot you or your teacher. I made it my entire academic career, and I never had to do a single active shooter drill. My son has had to do so many, and he's just in 3rd grade. We need common sense solutions, and a common sense solution is expanding background checks. We need universal background checks. We need to close the gun show loophole so that private sales at gun shows and online sales must go through background checks. This does not infringe on the Second Amendment. This is an administrative process.
Mr. Tiffany, are there any additional gun control measures you'd support, as your opponent mentioned, or if not, are there any gun control measures you'd like to wind back?
Yeah, I will always defend people's right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. I think one of the great concerns that we have in this country, and we don't see it here in northern Wisconsin, but there are law enforcement agencies across the country that are not enforcing laws that are already on the books. You take a look at the Parkland shooter, he could have been taken off the streets if law enforcement would have done their job in southern Florida. It makes no sense to pass new laws when the existing laws are not being enforced. Now, I've done something about this. In our last budget, we put additional money into mental health funding here for the state of Wisconsin. I think that's one of the key issues that we need to address, is making sure that we're getting money to those mental health professionals that can help people who are troubled.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, that's a common answer, that we already have laws on the books and we should address those. But they're not working. And one of the things that will be effective is expanding universal background checks. My opponent did not address that in his response, and I urge him to join me in a call for expanding universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, and ensuring that we also have background checks for private sales and online sales. Again, this does not infringe on the Second Amendment. This is an administrative process.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm really glad that my opponent brings this up, because you can't have it both ways. You're either going to defend the Second Amendment or you're not. And what she's talking about will infringe upon people's Second Amendment rights. That has been upheld throughout our nation's history, and we should expect anyone who's going to represent northern Wisconsin that they're going to defend the right to keep and bear arms. We can do that.
All right, we're now going to move to another emotional topic for many people. Mr. Tiffany, on your website, you list one of your top priorities as, quote, protecting the unborn. Ms. Zunker, you list yourself as, quote, a fierce defender of a woman's right to choose. Of course, abortion law varies a lot by state. In Wisconsin, abortion is prohibited after 20 weeks, except in cases of life or health endangerment. So would you be in favor of changing that, and if so, how? We start with Mr. Tiffany.
Yes, I voted to end late-term abortions here in Wisconsin, and that was the right vote to take. I was there at the birth of all 3 of my daughters. I was there in the delivery room. I saw the miracle of life enter this world. There's some that say we should be able to snuff out that life at any point during an abortion. I believe that we did the right thing by limiting that here in the state of Wisconsin. Also, I have voted to defund Planned Parenthood, and I did because your tax dollars should not be used if you do not agree with an abortion happening. I believe I've done the safe and responsible thing to make sure that we protect life.
Ms. Zunker, how, if at all, would you change abortion law?
I believe that we have got to protect a woman's right to bodily autonomy. I'm a fierce defender of the Constitution, and that includes the woman's right to bodily autonomy. And I believe that the laws that exist currently are the correct laws. This is a topic that the government has no place regulating. I can appreciate that my opponent was present for the birth of his daughters, and I appreciate that he shares that story in this topic. But the bottom line is that doesn't give him or any other individual the right to tell other women what they can do with their bodies. That is an equality issue. This is something I went through with my own body, quite frankly, as the mother of a 9-year-old. But this is something that is a very personal decision for a woman, whether that's just with herself, with her partner, with her doctor, or with her faith.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, I will always defend life. If you look at the last couple years, where we saw in the state of New York, they agreed that late-term abortions should be able to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, that's infanticide. The governor of Virginia, a year and a half ago, basically proposed the same thing. We have to defend life, especially when it comes to late-term abortions.
Ms. Zunker, 30 seconds.
I can say that my opponent is instilling some fear-mongering on this stage tonight. Nobody here is a proponent of infanticide, and I think we should stick to the issues here. The bottom line is that this is established law, and in the Supreme Court jurisprudence, not just Roe v. Wade, but Planned Parenthood v. Casey, 1992, a woman's right to bodily autonomy is an established constitutional right, a right that I will defend, and this is an equality issue. We are not going to oppress women and take away their right to bodily autonomy.
All right, next question. Marijuana is now legal for adults in 11 states. It's legal for medical use in 33. However, it remains completely illegal in Wisconsin. Would you like to see that changed? If so, how? We start with Ms. Zunker.
Yeah, I believe that we should legalize marijuana. You talked about two different things. First is to medical marijuana. The compassionate response, absolutely. We should legalize medical marijuana. Nobody should suffer if they can feel better from their medical condition, or their drugs that they take for their medical condition can alleviate that suffering. I will always come down on the side of compassion. As for recreational marijuana, I support this as well. We can have revenue from the taxation of marijuana. We can provide opportunities for farming in Wisconsin, whether marijuana or hemp farms we can look into as well. And we have a criminal justice problem here in this country. We have the bulk of our prisons and jails filled with nonviolent drug offenders. Let's get them out of prisons and jails, give them hope and a future and not a record.
Mr. Tiffany, how would you like to see, if at all, marijuana law changed?
Yes, so there are a few laws at the federal level that I think we could take a look at. And first of all, I believe we should allow the states to make that decision whether they want to legalize marijuana. And that's really consistent on my part. I believe we should bring much more control back to the states on a variety of issues, and that includes this one. But one thing that can be done by the federal government, currently marijuana is a Schedule I narcotic, no different than like LSD, heroin, things like that. So it really prevents research being done by agencies of federal government. We really could use that research being done at the federal level to be able to give policymakers a better idea of the effects of marijuana. And that will help policymakers at the state level to decide, is this the best thing to do for our state?
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Allowing the states to decide this issue is only going to cause chaos. Look at Wisconsin. We are surrounded by Michigan and Illinois that both have legalized marijuana. It doesn't make sense to allow some states to legalize marijuana and others not. Also, we have an opioid crisis here in Wisconsin, and including in Wisconsin 7. And if we were to legalize marijuana, this could reduce the opioid crisis by allowing those individuals an option that's legal, that's much safer, and that is another benefit to this.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds.
I think we've taken some good steps here in Wisconsin where we've legalized hemp so farmers can grow that now. CBD oil has been approved here in Wisconsin. So Wisconsin's taking some steps in that direction. But as your congressman, I think the important thing to do is allow the states to be able to make the choices they want in regards to public policy, including on this issue.
And that was all of them, yes. In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled gay marriage is a right and struck down bans on same-sex marriage nationwide. Did they get that right? And are there other LGBT laws or issues you'd like to see either passed or rolled back? We start with Senator Tiffany.
Yeah, I think the court has ruled, and it is the law of the land now that that we allow gay marriage in our country, and the court has ruled, and that is how our country is going to go forward.
Ms. Zunker.
I think that love is love, and I don't understand why individuals were allowed to be discriminated against for as long as they were. I absolutely support gay marriage, and I believe that laws that discriminate against gay couples are wrong. And I believe that we need to ensure legislation that protects everyone equally, regardless of what they look like, who they love, or how they identify their gender.
Mr. Tiffany, 30 seconds if you'd like it.
Yeah, I do not have anything to add.
Okay, Ms. Zunker? Moving.
I guess I don't have anything to add either.
Okay, moving on. Climate change remains a polarizing topic these days. President Trump has pulled America out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Progressive Democrats have introduced measures like the Green New Deal. Where do you stand on climate change? We begin with Ms. Zunker.
Climate change is an urgent and existential threat, and we absolutely need to address it with the urgency that it requires. I believe that we need to ensure clean air, clean water, and that our beautiful land stay protected from corporate greed for generations to come. I am a fierce advocate for our environment and believe that we need to take measures that reduce our carbon footprint.
Mr. Tiffany.
Yeah, what I hear from people are two different things. First, is there global warming happening? And some models say that there are, but they are models, and we need proof over time. But what I hear, what I hear from people is they want to reduce their emissions. They're very concerned about what is being emitted into our environment across the world. And I can tell you, I've done something about it. I think back 20 years ago when we were running wilderness cruises, the first opportunity that we had to put on more fuel efficient, clean burning outboards, we put those on at significant cost to our business, but it was the right thing to do. And as a legislator, I've fought to clean up lakes like Dead Pike Lake up in Manitowish waters that had been ignored for years. That lake needs to be cleaned up. It was put on the impaired list by the federal government, and I've been fighting hand in hand with the town of Manitowish waters and local lake property owners to get that cleaned up and have the Department of Natural Resources do what's necessary to make sure it's back as a beautiful lake here in northern Wisconsin.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Senator Tiffany, you did not fight for the environment. You fought for the corporate mining interests that now seek to destroy our lands, that are currently underway in Oneida County, trying to get a permit that will pollute our waterways. There's no such thing as safe sulfide mining. So you are not a defender of the environment, but the corporate mining interests that have funded your state elections. And I listen to people too on climate change. I listen to the scientists and I listen to the experts. And climate change is real and we need to address it.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I'm really glad that my opponent brought up the issue of mining, because I did author that bill, and we did two things that are very important. One, we wrote the toughest bill of any state in the United States, working with the lead regulator from the Department of Natural Resources as we crafted that bill. The other thing, we allowed local control. If a local community does not want a mine, they don't have to have a mine.
All right, we're going to take a short break now. We'll hear more from the candidates after the break. You're watching the 7th Congressional District debate right here on Newswatch 12. Welcome back to the 7th Congressional District debate here on Newswatch 12. If you're just joining us, I'm Justin Betti. We are joined by the two candidates in May 12th special election, Democrat Tricia Zunker and Republican Tom Tiffany. We'll get right back to the questions now. 2020 is not just a political year, it is a census year, which means political redistricting is coming up. That is traditionally a job done by the state legislature. Governor Evers has ordered a new independent panel to drop the congressional and legislative maps, which would still need to be approved by lawmakers. So kind of a two-part question. Do you think the state legislature has done a good job drawing the lines? And do you approve of the governor's plan? We begin with Mr. Tiffany.
So if you study the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, it's the legislature's duty to redistrict every 10 years. And 10 years. And 10 years. 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 When I was sworn in, I put my hand on the Bible and I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Wisconsin. So we followed through with that and rewrote the maps here in the state of Wisconsin. And I believe that same thing should happen. Now, Governor Evers has veto authority with the next round of redistricting. And if he chooses to use that authority, he can do that with the legislature. But it is the legislature's duty to redistrict our state every 10 years.
Ms. Zunker, what do you think of redistricting?
Politicians shouldn't be able to pick their voters. It's pretty simple. We have a very gerrymandered state, and this district especially. You can look at a map of our congressional districts here in the state of Wisconsin, and they don't make sense. And I think that fairness and logic should prevail here. I do support Governor Evers' plan. I believe that we have to have a nonpartisan approach to our redistricting.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, let's see, we're in 2020, in another year, the legislature is going to have to rewrite the maps here in the state of Wisconsin. Governor Evers has veto authority. If he disagrees with it, he can, and then it will go to the courts, just like it did in previous redistricting cases in the past. And he's welcome to execute that authority if he wants to, but it is the legislature's duty to redistrict every 10 years.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds.
I will state again, politicians should not be able to pick their voters. Pretty simple.
All right, Ms. Zunker, on your website you list among your priorities making higher education accessible and affordable and tackling the growing student debt crisis. What would you recommend doing about the cost of education in America? We start with Ms. Zunker.
I am a first-generation college graduate, and I had to work very hard to get through college and then go to law school, and I had to take on some debt to do that. And in fact, I'm still paying off debt from my law school education. That was a choice that I made, and I believe that we do need to make higher education more accessible and more affordable. But I believe that we need to promote the trades more. We need to promote technical schools. I am very proud of the career and technical education program that we have in the Wausau School District. And I think it's something that we need to focus on. And these are jobs that are good paying jobs, and there's less debt that is taken on. So I support making higher education more affordable and more accessible, and eliminating predatory lending practices, and making sure that we promote the trades.
Mr. Tiffany, what would you do about the cost of education in America?
Yeah, I actually think the federal government may have a role in some of this, but first of all, I'm the only person here on the stage that has done something about college tuition. We froze tuition here in Wisconsin about 6-7 years ago. We're going in next year to our 8th year of tuition being frozen in Wisconsin. For the average Wisconsin family that's sending a child onto our UW system, they'll have saved $5,000 if that student completes college in 4 years. Those are real savings. I've also voted to make sure that we're getting money to our technical colleges so that they have more resources to be able to get people in, get young people into their facilities and be able to get those 2-year degrees that can get them a good job. At the federal level, I think colleges and universities should be held accountable for the degrees that they're getting young people that sometimes are far too expensive. I think they can do a better job of transparency and letting young people know what the cost is versus the degree they're about to get.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, I think that we need to ensure that people are aware of the variation in educational opportunities. I visited with faculty actually up here in Rhinelander a few months ago, and I learned about the different opportunities that are available, whether it is somebody that just needs to do a 9-month certificate so that they can earn an extra $1 an hour, or a 1-year program or a 2-year program. There's a lot of opportunities out here. The narrative that college is for everyone is not the narrative today, and I think that we need to explore other affordable means of education.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's why I voted to advance career and technical education training in the state of Wisconsin. Very proud that we were able to do that and give people more opportunities. But there is a role for the federal government. We need greater accountability by our colleges and universities with the amount of debt that they're putting on young people with degrees that they may only get paid $30,000 or $40,000 a year. There should be greater transparency there, working with these young people as they're making a life-changing decision as they go into college.
All right, moving on back to the COVID-19 legislation a little bit here. On the Fox News radio show, The Guy Benson Show, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he wants any new COVID-19 relief packages to also protect businesses from legal action during the pandemic. Would you support that? This is for Senator Tiffany first.
Yeah, this is really all new territory in regards to COVID-19. And the worst thing that we could have is predatory lawyers going out suing businesses when they're going about their processes in a whole new world. They're not sure which way to turn. I mean, you look at what's happening right now in the state of Wisconsin. Businesses are uncertain at times of whether they're deemed an essential business or not. So it would be the worst thing to allow predatory practices by attorneys where they can take advantage of these businesses that are uncertain of what the legal ramifications are of what they're doing and without guidance from their government. So I think Leader McConnell, it brings up a good point, and that we need to make sure that we do not have businesses being scavenged by trial lawyers.
Ms. Zunker, would you approve of COVID-19 legislation also protecting businesses from legal action?
Well, I have to say I find Senator Tiffany's characterization of lawyers as predatory a bit interesting. Of the over 1.3 million attorneys in this country, less than 2,700 are Native American. I am one of them. And that is a representation that cannot be understated. That is a field of work that we need to see more people serving in. And these are individuals that are not predatory. No, I don't support this because with my legal background, I can tell you that you are just opening up possible exploitation, not even possible, probable exploitation of workers. You are denying claims. That is incredibly risky and will only hurt hardworking families. No, I absolutely will not support that.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, it's really new territory that we're going in here, and we want to make sure that businesses are not going to, because remember, it isn't just about the business. Those businesses employ people. We want people to be able to get back to work, and the worst thing that can happen is that they get run out of business as a result of a frivolous lawsuit.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds.
It's clear the intent of this proposal is to exploit families. It's to exploit the middle class. It's to exploit workers, take away their legal rights. I will never stand for somebody's legal rights being silenced.
All right, we are here in Wisconsin, which is known as a dairy state, though according to the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, more than 500 Wisconsin dairy farms have closed on average per year over the last 3 years. What would you like to see done to help dairy farmers? We begin with Ms. Zunker.
As the granddaughter of a dairy farmer, when I see what has happened to our mid and small farms throughout Wisconsin, it is deeply heartbreaking. We need to ensure access to competitive markets. We need to eliminate predatory business practices that hurt our small and mid-sized farmers. We need to ensure funding for mental health resources so that our farmers have the mental health resources that they need. We need to support our small businesses because when we support our small businesses, we support our farmers. And we need to ensure broadband access for our farmers. I've been on farms throughout the 7th Congressional District. I see how they are being deprived of opportunity because of the difficulty they have getting online. This isn't something that is unique to our farms either. We need to ensure broadband access throughout Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District.
Mr. Tiffany, what would you like to see done to help dairy farmers in Wisconsin and across the country?
I grew up on a dairy farm with my 5 brothers and 2 sisters. I still have brothers and sisters that are in agriculture, including dairy farming. I've seen this up close and personal. I saw it as a kid when we'd go through the ups and downs of running that 50-cow dairy farm. The federal government has taken some good steps forward, $19 billion for the coronavirus relief fund that the USDA has initiated to buy up some of the excess dairy products that are out there. That's a really good thing. Governor Evers just talked about in the last couple days, perhaps taking some of that $2 billion that we authorized in the legislature to take from the federal government to give some of that to our small farmers. I think that's a really good idea to do that. But we also, as we go forward here and we get through this tough period, we need to make sure that we're opening up even more avenues for dairy products to be sold around the world, because we're the best at growing agricultural products in the United States. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement.
You're about out of time.
Was a
You'll get 30 seconds in a second. Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds.
President Trump's trade wars greatly hurt our small and mid-sized farmers. My opponent has made it clear he's going to be a rubber stamp for anything that President Trump says or signs off on. The bottom line is we need a representative here that's going to represent the people of Wisconsin, represent the farmers, and Washington has turned its back on our small and mid-sized farmers. I will stand up for our farmers in Congress.
Mr. Tiffany, you 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, what I would complete my thought from earlier is that the trade agreements that have been executed here with Mexico and Canada, replacing NAFTA, the disastrous NAFTA, have really been beneficial to farmers. And we're just starting to see the leading edge of that in January as milk prices were starting to go up and now have crashed, as well as the trade agreement with Japan. There are good trade agreements that we can execute to help farmers once we get to the other side of this pandemic problem that we're having in the United States.
We're nearly 50 minutes into this debate. I don't believe anyone has mentioned President Trump. How would you grade President Trump's response on COVID-19? We begin with Mr. Tiffany.
Yeah, President Trump took the most important action almost immediately back in January 31st. And if you remember, he was criticized for that. He was criticized extensively by the Democrat presidential candidate Joe Biden, by the Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, for shutting travel down from China. In retrospect, he did the right thing. Also, they've put together guidelines for the states for us to follow, and I think he has provided leadership in that way. So these things are really important as we go forward, and what we need to do now is build on those bills that have passed through Congress now. Make sure we have that bridge that gets employers and employees, the people that work for a living, through this difficult time and back to prosperous times.
Ms. Zunker, what do you think of President Trump's performance on COVID-19?
Well, my opponent is sharing some revisionist history up here because President Trump did not have a response to coronavirus in January. What he did was not take it seriously. He did not listen to the medical experts. Again, we must listen to the experts as a source of decision making. And because he didn't listen to those experts early on, there are people that have died, avoidable deaths. There are people that contracted this virus that didn't have to because this wasn't taken seriously. Now, I'm very glad that we have measures in place. I believe that we need to continue to take it seriously, and we need to ensure that we can resume life as normal here in Wisconsin and throughout this country. And I am prepared to work with President Trump from Congress to address coronavirus, because it's clear that whoever wins on May 12th is going to be sworn into office immediately and have to address this. This is a problem that is, this is a virus that is going to extend for a significant amount of time, and we need somebody that is going to address this first and foremost, day one.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds. We didn't get a grade from anyone either. You can grade President Trump on the performance. A?
So I think I'm tested, I'm proven. This is about who's going to serve in Congress as we go forward. And I'm prepared to go out to Capitol Hill and work to make sure that we have that bridge for people to be able to get through. We need to be forward-looking here and be able to do the right thing for America. And that's what I'm prepared to do.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds. We still didn't get a grade from President Trump.
Yeah, I was waiting for that grade as well. I think that he did not listen to the experts when he should have, and it's even questionable if he's listening to them. The message changes from day to day. We need a leader that sends a consistent message each and every day, that provides comfort to the people of America, that we have what we need, or that we're going to get it. I certainly can't give him a high grade.
Close enough. Whoever wins this race will be joining a divided U.S. government. Democrats, of course, have the majority in the House, where you'd be joining. Republicans control the Senate. President Trump is a Republican. Of course, any of those things could change in November, but are there any topics for bills that you think can be passed through a split legislature like we're seeing now? We start with Ms. Zunker.
Absolutely. I think that we can drastically lower the cost of prescription drugs. I think we need to take on Big Pharma. When I see what they're getting away with here, charging us up to 10 times what they are charging that exact same drug or medication in other countries, it is wrong. And we need representatives who are willing to take on Big Pharma. And really this gets to the fact that we need campaign finance reform, because we have these big Pharma or Big Ag or the fossil fuel industry they're essentially buying seats in Congress. That's why I refuse to accept corporate PAC money, and I'm running a grassroots campaign, the only person on this stage who is. But I believe that this is not a controversial matter. Nobody's going to argue that we should continue to pay skyrocketing prescription drug costs.
Mr. Tiffany.
Yeah, I look forward to going to work out in Capitol Hill. And I think it's really important to recognize that there's good things that have been proposed this week by the president, like $1 billion to be able to help our senior care facilities, those nursing homes.
Rebuttal?
Because we now know, as we go through this process, the people that are most in their health and safety is most jeopardized is those who are senior, especially our frail seniors. And the President is stepping up, announcing this week that they're going to allocate $1 billion for that, as well as authorizing money for the National Guard to be able to help in those nursing homes. I think those are important things. As far as here in northern Wisconsin, there's some things that I'm going to work on immediately that I think should be bipartisan. One is broadband. We need broadband expansion here in northern Wisconsin. We need to delist the timber wolf here in the Great Lakes states, allow our state to be able to manage wolves. And also, we need border security, and I believe it should be a bipartisan resolution that we secure our borders so we know who's coming in and out of our country.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal or any other thoughts on bipartisan legislation.
I agree that we need border security. We need comprehensive immigration reform, but we need 20th century technology, not first century technology with a wall. And I also agree with my opponent that we need to expand rural broadband access. This is something that we desperately need in Wisconsin 7. Without it, people are being deprived of opportunity. And I would work very hard to ensure that we have broadband throughout Wisconsin 7.
Mr. Tiffany, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I have a long list of things that I want to work on immediately. There's big projects up in Superior that we need to see completed. There's a natural gas power plant that the Sierra Club, who has endorsed my opponent, has sued to stop that project. That will give us affordable electricity in northwestern Wisconsin. Also, there's a refinery up there that should be rebuilt. We need to make sure that happens, as well as the Port of Superior, a world-class port. We need to make sure we get the federal funding to be able to keep that a world-class port.
All right, we'll now conclude tonight's debate with the closing statements. Remember correctly, that was Ms. Zunker who went first for the opening. So, Senator Tiffany, you get to lead us off with your closing statement. You have about a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Channel 12, for putting on the debate this evening. It's very good to be here. You saw tonight, there's a clear difference between us two that are on the stage. I support border security. I also support keeping criminals in prison and not allowing them to be released early. I support life, including for the unborn, and I will always defend your Second Amendment rights to the Constitution. Folks, you sent me to Madison in 2010 when Wisconsin was going through a really difficult time. I went down and worked hand in hand with like-minded people, and we turned our state around. I'm tested, I'm proven, and I'll bring a good dose of Wisconsin common sense to Washington, D.C. And at times like this, I think about my 3 daughters, their friends, and your children and grandchildren. We need to leave America that's better for the next generation.
Ms. Zunker, you also get about a minute for a closing statement.
First, thank you, Mr. Betti, for moderating, WJFW for hosting, and to my opponent for your conversation tonight. Now more than ever, we need someone in office who will advocate for affordable health care and economic security for all Wisconsinites. I will work to expand access to affordable health care, make sure pre-existing conditions stay protected, and take on Big Pharma to lower the cost of prescription drugs. I'll advocate for additional help for small businesses and farmers and for funding to expand rural broadband access. And I will be a strong advocate for protecting our environment. I have the moral fiber, work ethic, and experience to get the job done for you in Congress, and I'm going to advocate for every person in this district, whether they voted for me or not. I'm going to put partisan politics aside and work hard to make life better here in Wisconsin. I will be accountable to you, the people, not outside interests. I'll prioritize constituent services to ensure that you get the help that you need. It will be a great honor to represent the people of Wisconsin in Congress, and I humbly request your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zunker, and thank you, Senator Tiffany, and thank you for watching at home. This was the 7th Congressional District Debate here on Newswatch 12. If you missed any of it, we'll have it posted on Facebook shortly. Reminder, we have been streaming it live. The special election for this seat is set for May 12th, and there is a reminder, there is still time to request your absentee ballot if you would like. We're back here again in about 2 hours for Newswatch 12 at 10. We'll see you then. Stay safe, have a great night, and a great weekend.